Happy Wednesday evening. Welcome to our midweek service where we are going through a look and gander at the Bible and the Josiah Manifesto. What's the Josiah Manifesto, you ask? Well, I hope you don't ask, otherwise you've been not paying attention. Let's see. Share that screen. There we go. The Josiah Manifesto is this book. Bible is that book. The Josiah Manifesto, book written in September, published in September, I should say, by Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. And so we've been looking at some thoughts from him on that and bringing out the scriptures that he references and having some conversations and taking a look at these things. And as mentioned last time, I paused in the beginning of class to kind of just zoom out, just for the understanding and to stop and reflect about how, from his perspective, abortion in America is a big deal to God and has been. And so all these things we're seeing that we're pointing to, Jonathan Cahn's whole point, his whole thesis, if you will, is that these things are happening not randomly, not chaotically, that there is actually an order even in the chaos, and that God is at work through it all, and that he is loving his people, he is disciplining his people, and those who aren't quote unquote his people, but those who have, as a nation as a whole, presented themselves to God saying they wanted to live under his care and live the value of life that he has established. And as we've drifted away from that, we take ourselves outside of that hedge and protection, and we have seen the results. And as you know me, as I talk about things, and he talks a lot, and we bring out a lot about political events, but as I want to continue to say, my care is not about the politics. My care is about the spirit behind the scenes and things moving. Of course, nations are led by politicians, and so are these national leaders taking us in a godly or godless directions. And sometimes the same person will not always go in. Some people are mixed bags. So sometimes any given leader can do both. And some of the things they lead in are godly, some of them not so godly. Some leaders are more godless, but then they occasionally do something that is in a godly direction. So I don't want us to be too focused on the individuals, aware of them, and more importantly, God's use of them, sometimes even despite themselves. And the fact that God, as we've seen, he works in the tapestry of time and patterns. And so we are seeing these things play out. We left off last week on the date of Saturday, September 26th, 2020. Spent the whole session there, and we are going to be picking up there this evening. So we can refresh, if we will, for scripture, Psalm 47. And as a refresh from the end of class last time, what we're seeing is this event that had been planned, that had been scheduled for 2 years in advance on the Washington Mall, there right in front of the National Capitol building, where thousands of people are gathered, millions are watching online, and Jonathan Cahn is leading out, and it's called The Return. And let's remember the timing of this. This happens to be the Saturday that's in between the Feast of Trumpets New Year and the Day of Atonement, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That whole 10-day stretch is a very much annual period of holy days for the Jewish people. And it is a time to get ready. The Feast of Trumpets at the beginning of the year, Rosh Hashanah, is the start, the kickoff of the days of preparation, the days of awe for getting ready for the ultimate Day of Atonement once a year, where in the Old Testament sacrifice days, the high priest, one man for the whole nation, once a year would enter into the Holy of Holies and make atonement for himself and for the people. Christ is now our high priest today, who that temple veil is now torn, and we have access directly through him to that throne of grace. So beautiful picture here. But these holy days and patterns that God laid out, even though the law of Moses itself has been set aside, as we've talked a lot about, the Judeo-Christian values are still in place, and God's timing is still in place as far as how he plays things. And he does, what's the purpose of a pattern? It's something that you can follow. That's why it's there. Oh, we can see this. What do crime scene investigators look for? Patterns of behavior so they can identify the suspects. And so when we make up puzzles for kids and things like that, what do? We try to lead them down a pattern so they can get to the end result. So patterns are instructive, patterns are repetitive for a reason, and they're educational, informative, and they're preparing. So God is doing all of this.
Very important to quilt.
Very important in quilting, yeah. And so picking up with some of the statements we left off with Jonathan Cahn on this event. Oh, and this Saturday, by the way, is itself a very special day. The Saturday in between the two, the Rosh Hashanah New Year and the Yom Kippur Day of Atonement, the Feast of Trumpets and the Day of Atonement. The Saturday that falls between them is a special Sabbath called Shabbat. What's it called again? Don't want to missay it, but I probably will. Shabbat Shavuot. It's the day of turning and the day of the return, which is what the event happens to be called. So here's a statement that he makes about the Feast of Trumpets and these different things happening. In the Bible, now remember this from Jericho. In the Bible, the sound of the trumpet marks not only the appointed times of God, but the appointed moments. Very, very specific here. The shofars of Jericho are an example of it, the ram's horns being played. So with the example of Jericho, it was at the exact moment of the blast that the walls fell down. So too, in the book of Revelation, 7 angels are shown sounding 7 trumpets. The blasts are matched by an immediate corresponding event in the heavens or on the earth, depending on which trumpet it is and what's associated with it. So here we are on Saturday, September 26th, 2020. While Jonathan Cahn is at this event, it turns out that another national event is unfolding. President Trump is on the White House lawn presenting his nomination for the Supreme Court to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who passed on that Yom Kippur Day, not Yom Kippur, the Rosh Hashanah Feast of Trumpets Day. And so now, on that day of judgment, a judge has been removed. And so now Judge Amy Coney Barrett is being presented as a nominee to be the Supreme Court justice in her place. So President Trump chose the same day to do that. Of course, this event was planned 2 years in advance, so they weren't coordinating or aware of that at all. So at the point in time where we left off, it's now a few minutes past 5 p.m. When Jonathan Cahn calls for the men with the chauffeurs to come to the stage, the president has just reached the podium on the White House lawn from which he will speak. As those gathered on the National Mall are anxiously waiting for the trumpets to sound, those gathered at the White House are anxiously waiting for the president to speak. So let's go to 2020. Yeah. So here we've got, this is the National Mall. There's the Washington Monument, making a 90-degree angle here. So here's Jonathan Cahn at the return, the national capital, U.S. Capitol right behind him. Right around the corner, here's the White House, and here's the White House lawn where President Trump and Amy Coney Barrett are. So what happens here? I'm going to replay this, but first let's read Psalm 47, verse 5. Psalm 47, verse 5, we're told, God has ascended with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. So just as we saw, trumpets were important on these holy days, trumpets, and they were important at Jericho, trumpets very much play a factor when it comes to the Lord. So let's review this right here. Okay, let's go right here. Let's pick
You
this
know
up.
you've written a successful poem when people really think it happened.
Okay, that's nice. So here we go.
The shofar. In the scriptures, God ordained the trumpet.
Now last week we played the example of the first trumpet. He goes through 7 blasts. Let's pick up over here where he's got folks on stage with him for a final blast here. That's a good spot, I guess. Yeah.
I'm gonna ask two things. They're gonna blast all at once, however many shofars we have out there. You're lifted up, but pointed upward. And we're gonna go full blast, the power of God all at once. And you also, people of God, you don't have a shofar? You got a voice. Shout to the Lord. Ready? And we'll just keep doing it for a little while. Ready, everybody? All right. From here, and Lord, as we seal the return and the power of God. Now, Lord, let the sound of your power go forth to the world. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, go.
Okay, so we get the idea there. Now, I don't know, Zoom hates music, as we've seen and experienced. So on the recording, I know that the music doesn't come out. I don't know if the sound of the trumpets is coming out okay on the Zoom end for those hearing, but on the recording, it doesn't really work that well at all. So anyway, so as we've seen, Jonathan Cahn proclaims the final declaration and prayer to seal this event, the return, and to pray for the release of God's power. And these were his words. From here, Lord, as we seal the return and the power of God, now, Lord, let the sound of your power go forth to the world in Jesus, Yeshua's name. And then he gives the word go. It is this moment that the blast goes forth from the trumpets on the stage and the shout goes up from the multitudes gathered on the National Mall. Okay, that's what we just witnessed. Now let's change scenes here. And now let's go to the White House.
You brought this kingdom together.
Yes, all these
It will
events.
stay together, even after you're gone. Help protect your loved one.
Okay, I'll pause that. Bring that back over here. Okay, so now here's what's happening around the corner. And I was watching this live on TV as it was happening, having no clue about Jonathan Cahn and the return around the corner. No, not from, no. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I stand before you today to fulfill one of my highest and most important duties under the United States Constitution, the nomination of a Supreme Court Justice.
Okay. So, as we've just seen here, on the White House lawn, the president is standing at the podium before the guests. He opens his mouth to speak. And he just said, I stand before you today to fulfill one of my highest and most important duties. Cool. This is the moment that begins the nomination of the one who will cast the critical vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. It begins the instant when the president begins to speak. It will alter American history. So when is it? One more thing for us. And I'll probably have another set of ads. So let's see, play this. And about, okay, that'll be good. Okay, now watch this. Now remember what we said about the trumpets and Jericho and the trumpets and Revelation and all that stuff. Now check this out.
National Mall, and they're getting ready, the trumpeters. On the other side is Donald Trump at the White House. So if we have the film, we can roll it.
Now a clock,
Here, Lord,
that's the
we
time
see
live
the
at the,
return
on the bottom for each.
and the power of God. Now, Lord, let the sound of your power go forth to the world. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, go.
Stand before you today to fulfill one of my highest and most important duties under the United States Constitution, the nomination of a Supreme Court Justice.
That is the power of our God. Our God is alive. That is the power. God is amazing. Now, I say, God, that was amazing. But you could have done something better. You see, it's always good to correct God because he's going to correct you. I said, Lord, that was so perfect. But there was, when I called up the men, there were 6 trumpets. It would have been nicer if there were 7. Jericho, 7. 7 trumpets. If we had a 7th trumpet, it'd be just like Jericho. And then all of a sudden it came and hit at me. Wait a minute. There was a 7th trumpet. What is the name of your president? Trump. He was the 7th trumpet. The Trump was the trumpet, and the Trump sounded when I said sound of the trumpets. God is amazing. And God has a sense of humor too.
Yes, he does. So what we are saying and seeing here is exactly this. Khan says go, and the trumpets blast. It is 5:04 p.m., 4 minutes and 33 seconds. When the president opens his mouth to set in motion the overturning of Roe v. Wade, it is 5:04 p.m., 4 minutes and 33 seconds. The overturning of the ruling that made abortion the law of the land is set in motion on September 26, 2020 at 5 o'clock, 4 minutes and 33 seconds to the ancient sound of God at the very same moment. Let's think about this for a moment. Like we mentioned, the walls of Jericho fell down. The president is delayed in starting the White House gathering. And because of the applause that greets him, as we just watched, the nomination is further delayed by another minute. The return is also running late. There are well over 150 people who take the stage to speak, worship, or pray this day. Now think about this on both sides. If any of them go on a moment too long or stop a moment too short, or if those who go over their time do not go over their time, or not go over their time for the exact number of seconds that they do, if there is not the exact number of extra words, extra notes, words not spoken, notes not played, pauses, changes, twists, and turns, as there are, and each lasting the exact number of seconds they last, or saving the exact number of seconds they save. The convergence will never happen. So thoughts, reactions?
You can't make this stuff up.
Cannot make this stuff up.
God's in control.
That's it.
God is truly in control.
I know that a lot of people would just, toss some of this away as a coincidence. The people that, don't like the president would toss it away. But then the people that also don't like the president would be, well, see there, he's opposed to abortion. So, you gotta get this guy out of here, like he could have won either way, And it's interesting because there are a lot of Christians who have refused to endorse him or vote for him or
Oh, yeah.
whatever. So I wonder if they were presented with these facts, if they could, deny these things.
Amen. And as Jonathan Kahn mentioned, Jehu, who, remember, we are talking from this book. I've picked up 4 different biblical parallels in these last 10 years. Moses in the life of Amy Coney Barrett, Jehu, king of Israel with Trump as president, the book of Joel, the prophecy of Joel, as we've been talking about and will continue to, and then, of course, King Josiah of Judah, for whom the book is named. Jehu, as we read from the book of Kings there, was a wild guy. People didn't always know what to do with. He was unpredictable. He did some pretty amazing, direct, unexpected things. And he wasn't always very godly in his own character and some of his own actions. Yet, again, more important to us than the individual is God at work. The God who is at work is more important than any individual. I never want to say of any individual, God can't use that person. Or, the flip side, God can only use this guy because this is my buddy and I like him and I idol worship him. So of course God's going to use that guy. No, they're just as human as the other guy I didn't like. Cyrus. Yeah. Who was mentioned by name centuries before he was born. Just like Josiah was mentioned by name centuries before he was born. And so great example. Thank you, Sister Minnie. And so to Sister Ashley's point, people can hate on Trump all they want. That's their free right and reign. And I respect everyone's opinions and perspectives. And I don't think anyone should be looked at way too highly or way too lowly because we're all equals when it comes to what really matters, the sin factor. And it's just a matter of grace and forgiveness and Christ in our lives or not. And so in this case, God is using someone whom even quote unquote Christians are not cool with. But God's capable of doing that. God used Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, to accomplish God's will. The whole book of Habakkuk is Habakkuk having a conversation with God about that very thing. So dislike someone, hate on them all you want. That doesn't limit your feelings about someone, my feelings about someone, their feelings about someone, quote unquote, Christianity's feelings about someone does not limit or tie God's hands in who or what he can use and accomplish, as we see here. And that doesn't even mean that the person being used knows they're being used of God. God moves things around that as he wills and sees fit. Not that we don't have free will, but he works with our free will. Our free will doesn't take things out of God's hand. God is so masterful. He takes our free will, the material we give him to work with, and weaves, again, his patterns and designs, and we see the outcome here. So let's talk about how crazy this is, all of this coming together here. Because now we have Moses, we have Jehu, we have the Josiah aspect is the breaking of the altar. The Americans' altar of Baal is Roe v. Wade. And so this is the first concrete step towards that breaking of that idol. So there's Josiah. And then Joel is the prophecy and the assembly and the blasting of the trumpets. That's all in Joel. So we've got Moses, Jehu, Joel, and Josiah all coming together at this one moment here. But let's talk about this as Jonathan Kahn lays out. It is the confluence of countless factors at the White House that alter the timing of the president's announcement, coalescing with another confluence of countless factors at the return that caused the blast of the shofars to converge with the voice of the president. And it is the converging not only of the two events, but of all the mysteries, prophetic threads, puzzle pieces, and streams into this one precise moment. The mystery of the Jubilee converges with the sounding of the trumpets in the Jubilean year of abortion's entrance into America. States started allowing it in 1970. We're 50 years later, 2020, the Jubilee of abortion entering America, abortion on demand specifically. And Jubilees are associated with trumpets. So these events in turn converge with the entrance of the plague, COVID, into the land at the exact times and places in which abortion entered the land. One Jubilee earlier. Patient zero, Washington State. And so Washington was one of the key states, along with Hawaii and New York, to be the first ones to legalize abortion on demand. New York City was the abortion capital of America. In the early 70s, people were driving from out of state to go to New York City to have their abortions. Before it became, I don't want to use the phrase law of the land because the Supreme Court doesn't make laws. Supreme Court, they hand out rulings about what laws are constitutional or not in the view of the nine at the time. And so the ruling handed down in 1973 in Roe v. Wade was that a law could not be made by any state hindering abortion on demand. So it basically by default became legal across the land unless the Congress were to act on that, which they haven't. So we have the plague, 50 years, the plague of death, as we see in the Bible. Jeremiah prophesied about a plague in the place where you were at the Valley of Hinnom, where you were sacrificing these children. So New York was the abortion capital. New York became the COVID capital. Shoving all those people into the senior centers, those senior living facilities, and then not having places to bury the bodies. They ended up putting them out on an island, which ended up being the Potter's Field, exactly like the Bible. And so all of that, all these in turn converge with the mystery of the American Jehu, who sets in motion the breaking down of the modern day Temple of Baal. Again, Roe v. Wade is America's Temple of Baal. And he sets down the breaking of that altar on the White House lawn as the trumpets are sounding. All of these, in turn, converge with the mystery of the one born amidst the slaughter, the American child of the Nile. I'm glad we're talking about Moses in Sunday school at the time. We're talking about this on Wednesdays. Standing at the president's side when the trumpets sound and being lifted up to fulfill the purpose for which she was born. All of these, in turn, converge with the year of holy days that began on Passover. We had the lockdown on Passover of 2020. We had on Pentecost, baptism in fire and spirit, the Holy Spirit being breath. On Pentecost, we had the fiery, peaceful protests after George Floyd, I can't breathe. So Passover, we had lockdowns. Pentecost, we had breath and fire going out. And so then here we have on the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Judgment, we have a judge being removed from the earth, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And here on Shabbat Shuvah, the Day of the Return, we have all these events coming together here on this holy day. And all these, in turn, again, converge with the Hebrew holy day of the Most High Court and the Most High Judge, the day on which a judge is removed from the High Court at the sound of the trumpets. She passed in the evening as the trumpets were being sounded. When prayers are being prayed to revoke the evil decree, part of the Jewish prayers that they prayed at that point of time are exactly that, for the evil decree to be removed. And now another will begin rising to take her place on another Hebrew high holy day, the Shabbat Shuvah. The one leaves her seat on the court at the sound of trumpets. The other begins her rise to the same seat, to the same sound, the sound of the trumpets. And all of these further converge with the case that has just arrived at the Supreme Court in the Jubilee of Roe v. Wade. The case that was sent on the Hebrew calendar, Sivan 23rd, the day of the decree that revokes the evil decree. That was what we read from the book of Esther, where there was that decree to genocidally wipe out the Jews. And so Queen Esther got her husband, King Xerxes, at the risk of her own life, to allow the Jews to have a day of defending themselves, a day of undoing the evil decree. That day happened on the Hebrew calendar of Sivan the 23rd in the book of Esther. It was on the day on the Hebrew calendar, Sivan the 23rd, that this court case that would eventually revoke the evil decree of Roe v. Wade, this passed on its last court on its way up to the Supreme Court that very same day, the day of revoking the evil decree. The sounding of Trump in 2020, the year of Jubilee, sets in motion the overturning and the redemption. When Jonathan Cahn stands on the stage and says go to signal the sounding of the trumpets, he has no idea that another trumpet is sounding as well. The trumpets sound on the National Mall, and at the very moment on the White House lawn, another trump also sounds. He didn't know about this till after the fact. Amy Coney Barrett is nominated in late September. The court case of Dobbs versus Jackson has just been sent to the court that summer. Amy Coney Barrett is the first justice to sit on the Supreme Court, born in the days when it was legal to prevent her from being born. It is the outworking of the mystery that goes back over 3,000 years to the baby in the Nile. And so, in accordance with the mystery, the one whose birth was framed by Roe v. Wade arrives at the Supreme Court just when a case that could overturn Roe v. Wade also arrives at the court. Remember, Moses was supposed to have been killed with the baby boy death decree, but he would live, not only would he live to be the one to overturn the nation of Egypt who had issued that decree. So she, who was born during the time that this became abortion on demand was becoming legalized, would live to be the one to actually cast that final vote to see it overturned. And she, by all rights, could have been one who suffered as a consequence of it. Now, contrasting the justice, her with the justice she replaced. Justice Ginsburg was of the generation that legalized the killing of the unborn. Justice Barrett is of the generation whose killing in the womb was legalized by Justice Ginsburg's generation. Now the one is taken away and the other comes into her place. And for the first time, child born in the days of abortion on demand sits on the Supreme Court, rules for the children who have not yet been killed. And it all comes to pass in the year of the abortion jubilee, when all is reversed, inverted, and undone, which is the whole point of a jubilee, restoration and return. So, thoughts, reactions to any or all of that? Yes, that's
President
me.
Reagan said, all the people who are for abortion have already been born.
Yep. They do have that benefit. Everyone who is pro-abortion has already had the advantage of being born. So that is true. And my thing is, for all this outcry over minorities and over protected categories of citizens, how many of them are aborted? You know, how many women, how many of these different quote unquote races or ethnic groups, people groups? How many that would have grown up with different sexual orientations? Are their lives not valuable? Sure they are. All of them are. Every life is valuable and precious.
That's it. Children are a gift from God. So if
Absolutely.
you learn to abort that, you clearly refuse that gift. What an insult to God.
That's a very great point.
And if you say, well, I don't think that just because I was born a girl and then I'm a boy, I think I was a boy. It's also an insult to God.
Or with Down syndrome, or whatever different cases are for ending pregnancies, terminating the lives of the, I like the phrase preborn. Yeah, absolutely. Which is again why I love the Declaration of Independence. We're created equal, not born equal, created equal. Endowed with our creator, by our creator, with these inalienable rights. First one being life itself. Yeah, so important stuff. So that wraps up the year 2020 for us. We now move into the fun-filled events of 2021, starting with the very first month of January. And let's see, we're going to right over here. We're not done with Moses. Here's Moses. No, go away. Don't care about that's not Moses. Here is Moses right here in the chamber of the House of Representatives. Now, across on the other side, we talked about this a while in an earlier Wednesday night class. This is actually from one of Jonathan Cahn's other books, the book on Jubilees, actually, Jubilee and Mystery. So in the center is Moses with his face forward. All the others are on the sides or with their faces turned. Moses is the only full-face one here. And he's dead center, looking down on the podium of the Speaker of the House. And he's also, of course, all over the Supreme Court as well. So in fact, I think this, yeah, so there he is. That's the face of Moses in the chamber of the House of Representatives. No. And so, why is this significant? Because, and we touched on it a while ago, but it's coming up again in relation to all the context of all these other things now. So we remember the 2020 election, right? And so there was not only a change in the presidency, but also a change in the House of Representatives and Congress. So all over to the same party. So the new session of Congress gets inaugurated with a prayer. I actually played a part of it a while ago, and we're going to take a look at it again. So Moses looks down from the Supreme Court with the 10 Commandments in hand as the Supreme Court strikes down 10 Commandments in the public square. Moses looks down on the podium in the House chamber when, and we're about to play it, the officiant dedicates the new Congress to someone. It's not Jesus Christ. Moses looks down on America as it descends into apostasy, just as he looked down on Israel as it descended into apostasy the day of the golden calf. So what's up with this inaugural prayer of the new session of Congress? Right here. On January 3rd of 2021, the 117th session of Congress is set in order with this opening prayer. And I'm going to pick it up at that should be good. Turn the mic back on. So check this out and we'll talk about it.
We can see ourselves in our politics as we really are, soiled by selfishness, perverted by prejudice, and inveigled by ideology. Now may the God who created the world and everything in it bless us and keep us. May the Lord make his face to shine upon us and be gracious unto us. May the Lord lift up the light of his countenance upon us and give us peace. Peace in our families, peace across this land, and dare I ask, O Lord, peace even in this chamber, now and evermore. We ask it in the name of the monotheistic God, Brahma, and God known by many names, by many different faiths. Amen and amen.
So, Brahma. The new Congress, and this is back from getting back to the Josiah Manifesto here after looking at, anyway, the new Congress is inaugurated with a prayer offered by the Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. The problem with the prayer is the God to whom Cleaver prays. He seals it with the name Brahma. Brahma is, and he tried to make it all sound the same. The one monotheistic God known by many names of it or many different faiths. He's trying to blur it all together, he said. Brahma, as Jonathan Cahn points out, is an eternity away from the God of the Bible. Brahma is a Hindu god, one of three gods, ruling deities. The others are Vishnu and Shiva. Brahma has 4 heads. He originally had 5, but the god Shiva cut one of them off when he was caught lying. Brahma is a pagan god. And so on January 3rd, 2021, the 117th Congress is consecrated to a pagan god, and America's national temple, where Congress meets to represent the people, we'll talk about this more, the building is referred to as America's Temple. So America's national temple becomes a house of prayer to a pagan god, as in it's now a pagan temple with this new congressional leadership in place. So let's talk about this new congressional leadership in place. Again, the spirit behind being more important, but I understand the direction here. The new Democratic-controlled Congress brings to Capitol Hill an agenda that stands in stark opposition to biblical morality and values, as touching sexuality, religious freedom, gender, and the lives of unborn children. The new Congress comes to the Capitol building prepared to enact the most pro-abortion agenda in American history. So even though we had this great event at the return, and we've got Justice Amy Coney Barrett now on the Supreme Court, this is what's happening in our government, in the other branch of government. So it is not only the prayer that turns America's temple into a pagan one, it is also the agenda. This first week in 2021 is when this agenda takes full control of Capitol Hill and the temple of the American Republic. And it all happens when a Jehu is still in power and in the capital city. Biden has not been inaugurated yet. So Congress starts its new session before the inauguration of the next president. So President Trump is still present when they do this. These are the ingredients of the ancient template. It is a battle waiting to happen. So that was January 3rd. We're going to fast forward a couple days. The 10th chapter of the book of 2 Kings records Jehu called for an assembly in the capital city. So President Trump, let's go there, close that, and let's go here. So President Trump calls for an assembly in the capital city, just like Jehu did. They meet in the capital city on Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2021. Jehu's gathering was ultimately directed at the National Temple in the capital city. Trump's gathering of January 6th likewise is directed on America's National Temple, the Capitol building. The ancient template centers on 2 gatherings or 2 groups of people gathered in that city. The priests and the worshipers of Baal who convene inside the temple, and the supporters of Jehu who stand outside the temple. So on January 6th, the gathering that convenes inside the Capitol building represent the victory of an anti-biblical agenda. The gathering that takes place outside the Capitol building represents the supporters of the modern day Jehu, Trump. It is of note, the ancient template tells of both Jehu and his partner Jehonadab. Remember, Jehonadab was the religious conservative that Jehu invited to ride in his chariot to the Capitol. And so President Trump, following the template of Jehu, he invites Christian conservative Mike Pence to ride in his chariot as his vice president to the presidency and to the election. So at this event, and we'll read it next week in 2 Kings 10 here, the ancient template tells of Jehu and his partner Jehonadab both playing a prominent role in what happens with the Temple of Baal. So both Trump and Pence will play a prominent role in what happens on January 6th in the Capitol building. Again, America's national temple. In fact, let's see. That is actually a good spot for us to pause, and we'll pick up next week with what happens according to the Bible on January 6th in America. So pausing right here for now. Any other thoughts, any questions, any reactions to these things we have looked at and considered for this evening? Ashley, I see you kind of shaking your head there.
It's hard to believe. Yeah. I mean, in a sense, because that's the day that we'll live in infamy.
Yep.
So to see any kind of biblical correlation is really, mind blowing.
Amen. Amen.
I did have a question though.
Yeah.
We studied a little bit about like eclipses and blood moons and stuff. There's a big eclipse coming up here really soon. Is that are we gonna be reading about that in one of Jonathan Cahn's books, or is it nothing of importance?
I don't know about his, if that's gonna make his next book, but it will make our next class.
Yeah, but I put something on Facebook.
Yeah, he sent me the link about it.
Yeah.
And there's some things that are interesting about that, some things that are completely off from the Bible. in that.
I thought it was interesting, yeah.
Yeah, the main thing where it's off is they're off by thousands of years on the timing of Jonah going to Nineveh. So that eclipse that they refer to has no bearing on Jonah. But the other stuff that's interesting with the marking of the Alpha Omega and the Hebrew letters and all that stuff, that's pretty interesting, and got some other things to relate to on that. So we will talk about the April 8th eclipse when we get together next Wednesday. So I'm glad you asked about that. Yeah, so it'll still be before the eclipse happens. And we're not going to have the best view of it here on the West Coast, but
Georgia's going to Texas.
she's going to Texas to see it.
Taking a trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From what I understand, and part of what I'll show related to this next week, we'll touch on that. Until you have been right under a total eclipse, you don't know what you're missing. Apparently, it is a very unique experience that just like seeing photos of, the sun or the moon, with the one behind it, the ring, just doesn't do justice to the experience when it affects the whole sky around you and everything. So pretty immersive event.
We had some clips recently.
Yeah, there was just one in November.
Because Alyssa and I was going to work and it just felt weird. It
Uh-huh.
felt really weird out. And Alyssa called me and she's like, "Mommy, it's weird. Why does it feel so weird?" And we're like, "Oh, it's that eclipse, So even though we might, I don't know what.
Not
we
get the
saw,
full, yeah.
but it felt.
But even that was
You see
enough
the
to,
haze,
It
yeah.
really all.
Well, our work was selling the glasses, and so we were using them at work, so we got to see it as always, and then they had little books and stuff, so when they were on clearance, I just sent the one to Derek and his kids, and they gave one to Sadie and Malachi at Christmas, so they'll have the glasses for the 8th, but I didn't think about buying one for me, for the next one.
right. So thank you for that. I really appreciate the discussion and interaction very much. So if nothing else from anyone else, I'll go ahead and stop our screen share. And we'll stop our recording and let's get ready to meet in the center of the aisle and close out in our season of prayer.
Oh.